Hello and welcome to Marineford TCG. Today we're going to be talking about the OP10 pre-releases that are coming up in just a couple of weeks from now. This video is going to aim to cover everything you need to know about the event itself, what you need to bring, what you can win and how you can sign up, some general tips for pre-release in general if you've not played before or are trying to get your first win, and at the end we're going to have some top techs that I've picked out of OP10, as well as some event-specific tips for this format that might differ a little from previous pre-releases you've played in the past. So, starting off with the info, this is going to run from March 14th to 20th at your official Bandai stores and also your LGSs. Make sure you check with your LGS, give them a call, say hello next time you're in. I'm sure they're running one, but the exact date, you'll need to get off them, I can't give you that. Most of these should be up on the Bandai app, if not now, then relatively soon, but you can always call your LGS to confirm. LGSs get to choose whether they want to run these as constructed events or sealed events. Constructed is what we play every week. You bring your deck and you play against other players in the standard constructed format. Sealed is a different format, which is what the rest of this video is going to cover. I'm a massive advocate for stores running these as sealed, because we don't get many opportunities to play sealed, and there's plenty of time to play constructed. You can play that on the sim, at a regional, or just at your locals. So sealed, you're going to open 6 packs, and then you're going to build your deck from that. Really nice chance to get product ahead of schedule, and have just a bit of a fun time with a different format. So for participating, you're going to get both this buggy promo up in the top right. This is the foot buggy that's looking to be very important for the buggy deck. Is it going to make buggy that much better? I'm not so certain, but at the very least, it's going to make buggy worth trying again. And you're also going to get this horrible lore promo that they made to reprint the RP lore leader that was banned. This is horrible. Don't play this, please. You're also going to get a pre-release pack. So this is a little pack of 2 cards. It can contain either commons or uncommons with a pre-release stamp, similar to this Brook that you can see up here in the left. This was from the previous set. Obviously don't have images of the new set yet, but this is just to show you what it looks like. Some of these, if they're the more popular characters or cards in more popular decks, can fetch a few quid, but nothing too crazy. They're just nice things to bling out your decks with a little bit. So if you win, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get the winner version full art of this buggy. I do believe this is a hollow foil. Don't shoot the messenger if it's not. But if you're a buggy main, you're going to want to grab 4 of these for your buggy deck. This is probably the best pre-release promo we've had in a minute. The purple Zorro was okay, and since then it's been nothing too crazy. But yeah, this buggy, pretty good. If you win this, happy days. It was last time we got the leaders, right? But they're not promos, so you can get them anyway. Moving on. Sealed. 6 packs. You're going to open them. You can build your deck. You can build a 40 card deck, not 50. It's not the same as standard. And there are also no color restrictions and no card count restrictions. So the way that leaders work, we're going to cover in a minute. There are 2 options. Some stores will force you to play the Rainbow Luffy leader. I'll cover that in a moment. Other stores will let you pick any leader that you have in your binder or that you pull in the packs. So make sure you bring a selection of leaders down with you. We're going to cover the best ones. Don't worry if you're new. I've got all the best ones on the slide coming up, but that's something to consider. If you choose to play the red Luffy from Starter Deck 1, you can play blue cards, black cards, purple cards, no problem. Any color of cards is a-okay. And if you're lucky enough to pull 5 secret rares of the same one, 5 secret rare laws, say, you can play all 5. It's crazy and pre-release, really cool. And the rest of your pulls are your sideboard. So if you lose your round 1 and a card in your deck doesn't quite work out how you thought it would, you can take it out, put something else in, and it's okay. Obviously you can't sideboard during the game, and in normal constructed, you're not allowed to sideboard, but pre-release, we're playing for fun. We're not as hardcore gamers in pre-release, so you get to swap cards out. These are all new, so it's sort of understood that you're going to be less familiar with these cards. In terms of some general tips for the pre-release format, if you're new, swing 6k. A lot of the time, if you're trying to take life out of your opponent, in normal, you're going to swing 5, then 7 perhaps. In pre-release, swinging 6 is really good. Your opponent's not going to have as many 2Ks as they would in their standard deck, and their deck is not going to be as consistent with drawing into those 2Ks even. So swinging sort of 1K above, if they have a 6K unit, swinging 7 into it, is often more valuable than it would be in standard. Board control, very important. Pre-release is all about board because there's low counter. You're going to be playing a lot of 1Ks and probably a fair amount of bricks. Not as many 2Ks, of course. So being swept in the late game from like 3 lives to 0 is a real possibility if you don't control your opponent's board. So limiting the amount of characters that your opponent is able to control is going to be even more important than in standard. Blockers are invaluable, but do be aware of what your opponent could do to get around them. Know what events are in the set. I'm going to cover a lot of the events that are reasonable to play in this video. However, make sure when you're going through your packs, you read everything carefully, and do have a once-over of the set list so you know what every card in the set might do. It's really helpful, especially if you're aiming for that winner card. So, Rainbow Luffy. This is one of the options that some stores will force you to do. If they are, they will probably give out these. Not sure if we're getting them with this set. We did get given a bunch of these with the last pre-release in set 9. They gave everyone a pack with this in it. So this is just very simple. 5,000 power, 5 life leader. He's not playable in standard constructed, but he's considered a leader with all colors, names, and types. This means all your leader or type knot cards are going to work with him, which can create some pretty interesting combos that you wouldn't see in the standard game. For example, you can use the main effect of 10 cost Teach, because Monkey D. Luffy is considered a Blackbeard pirate. You can use Kung Fu Dugong, because what Kung Fu Dugong does if it says if you have another Kung Fu Dugong, it gains blocker. Well, Monkey D. Luffy has every name, and that includes Kung Fu Dugong. So your Dugong is going to become a blocker. And any trigger that says if your leader is Egghead, or if your leader is Nico Robin, they'll all work. It's basically a way to play a sort of vanilla fair version of the format, but with every combo popping up. And it's pretty cool, honestly. This is probably my preferred way to play. However, if your store is doing choose a leader, these might be some of the ones that you want to consider. In terms of the old guard, Captain Kidd has been around since the very beginning, and he's consistently been one of the better leaders. Just being able to attack twice for the cost of 1 card and 3 Don is great. If you can't build a board for whatever reason, you're not drawing the right cards, or your opponent's able to control your board better than you're able to control theirs, you can use Kidd's effect to get another attack in, whether that's to try and remove some of their dudes, or to go for lethal yourself. Bonnie is a great way to slow the game down. You're going to get out of 1 attack for free every turn, at the cost of not being able to play on curve, because you have to leave 1 Don up, and you're not going to have anything like a Rouge to do that for you. So Bonnie's pretty decent. Both of these are fairly strong leaders, sort of just operating on different ends of the spectrum. Kidd, much more about your aggro. Bonnie, about slowing your opponent down. Yamato, if you like going balls to the wall, just slamming in with your leader, Yamato's great. I think there is a couple of reasons that we'll get into later in the video that Yamato might be a little better in this format than it was in OP10. I think generally Yamato was not very popular for that set, but we'll go over that later. She's generally just pretty good. If your opponent can't find blockers, this leader's just kind of crazy. You can win the game in 3 turns, pretty much. Red Sanji is probably my pick for the best leader in the format, at least before this set. I think just being able to give all of your vanillas, and vanillas are really good in this format, Rush, whilst that's not very good in standard constructed, is very good in pre-release. And there are some really cool characters with when attacking effects that also gain a lot of value from a leader like Red Sanji in colours that aren't even red. Captain Kidd is probably the only one of the new leaders that I think is worth considering. All of the others are very type locked or just not very good leaders. So I think Kidd is decent. If you pull a lot of Supernova characters, you could consider Kidd. Him giving you extra blockers and setting your characters as active is very reasonable. It just requires you to draw those supernovas. So it's going to depend on your card pool as to whether you give this a go. If you just want to take one leader, I would recommend Sanji. I think Sanji is probably the best generic leader. Giving everything Rush is just so good, and you'll understand that if you've played pre-release before, or once you start playing it if you haven't. So, what about this set? Here are your 2Ks. There's only one common 2K in this set. That's Uzi. The effect is really bad. However, you're not playing this for the effect. Every single 2K that you pull in your packs is going in your deck. It doesn't matter how many you have. If you've got 10, amazing. You're not gonna, but if you do, it's your lucky day. Generally, these common ones, you will probably pull 1 to 2 of each. So you'll probably expect to get at least 1 Uzi, maybe 2. Shiki is an SR. The effect is not very good. However, if you pull it, you're going to play it. And these are your uncommon 2Ks. On average, you'll get 0.5 of each of these. So there's 8 here. You should probably expect to get around 4 uncommon 2Ks in general. On average, even. None of these are amazing. X-Drake can rest a character sometimes. Momonosuke and Kinemon are completely useless. Nami is mostly useless, as is Foxy. Baby 5 in Rainbow Luffy format can ramp you a Don, but it comes at the cost of 2 cards. So, not great. Giola is okay, but you've got to leave 2 Don up for her, so it's not amazing. Mocha, probably the best of the bunch. It's like a really bad Otama. Are we ever playing this out? Probably not, but you're going to include it anyway. These are the ones that are more worth using. Beige can have a little bit of synergy with 1 or 2 cards in this set. Probably the biggest one is either the Rush Zoro or the Basil Hawkins to get a bit of value out of their triggers. Chopper is, I would say, the best 2K in the set. It's just a great blocker. It's a 6K blocker in your opponent's turn, and it's 4 cost, so your opponent's got to really invest into removing it. Sabo is just a decent stat line 2K. You can play him out. You might use his effect. If your opponent's removing something by an effect, you can pick him up. It's okay. But just being a 4/5 with 2K counter is very good. These rare 2Ks, these 3 up here are rares. You probably might get 1 of these, not each, 1 total in your 6 packs. But again, include it. I think the approximate amount of 2Ks you're going to have in your deck on average is around 6 or 7. Again, your mileage may vary. You may end up with 20. You may end up with 1. So if you get loads, just include them all, even though we've acknowledged that their effects are mostly bad. Vanillas, you're also going to include every vanilla that you pull, and this set in particular has a weird fascination with 5 cost vanillas. We've got 5 of them down here. Like I said before, these are all commons, so you're going to expect to pull 1 to 2 of most of these. And for this reason, I'll say it again at the end, I think going first is going to be better in this pre-release, because you've got so many good 5 costs that playing one of these out on curve is going to be great. There's only 1 4 cost vanilla, so there's definitely something to be said for that. In terms of do any of these have extra synergy, Cavendish and Rouge are both supernovas, so you can restand those with the Kid leader. Other than that, not really. None of these particularly do anything else. But you're going to play all of them anyway. In terms of why vanillas are so powerful in this format, it's because so many of the cards that you pull are just bad. Any searchers, mostly unplayable. There's a lot of Dressrosa chaff in this set that is just trash, both constructed and this. Anything that's type locked, there are a few like Thriller Bark cards that need other Thriller Bark cards to work. And anything that's type locked or relies on a card from a previous set is useless. And if you're not playing Rainbow Luffy leader, anything that relies on you having, for example, a Dressrosa leader or stage is also going to be useless. So you're going to end up playing all of these whether you like it or not, and they are some of the better cards that you can see in the early game for sure. This is a slide I like to call Vanill-ish. This is the Pokemon Vanill-ish, if you're not familiar. It's pretty cool. These are cards with vanilla stat lines, but some kind of downside. In this case, all of them just have no counter. Are you going to include most of these? Yes. We'll go through them very briefly. Brownbeard just gets bigger when he attacks, which is really nice. It's not too crazy. He becomes a 3/6, which is great. Zoro is one of very few rush options. Rush in pre-release is fleeting. There's not much of it. That's why Red Sanji is so good. But this Zoro just has rush if you meet his condition. He also has a trigger play if you're playing a supernova leader. Mainly Monkey D. Luffy, the rainbow one. Sai, it has a pretty terrible effect, but he's a 3/5. It's fine. Marco is a blocker that's also got a vanilla stat line. And on KO, he has a pretty good effect. You can bounce a 4. So if your opponent missequences horribly, on 3 you play out Marco. On 4, maybe they play out a 4/6 vanilla. Then attack 5, you can block with Marco, bounce their vanilla. And you've just reset them to back where they were. Is that going to be the right play all of the time? Maybe not, however, you can. Killer is a vanilla stat line that on KO, if you're playing Rainbow Luffy or Kid, gets to do a little search. Not too crazy, but it's fine. And Brook is, again, vanilla stat line, 3/5. And on KO, you get to rest a guy, which is reasonable. And the fact that there's 6 3/5 Vanill-ish cards, and then 5 5/7 vanillas, I think you can see why I think going first is good. Just playing out one of these on 3, one of these on 5. Playing on curve's great, right? In terms of 4 costs, these are generally slightly better. The Fighting Fish is not that, he is terrible. Ryuma gaining double attack is really good in pre-release. You can swing 7, demand a 2 and a 1, and remember your opponent's not going to have many 2s. So if you put 2 Dom on him, swing 8, that's even better. 2 2s is a big ask, and if they don't have it, they've got to take 2 swings, 2 attacks. Cavendish is great. In Red Sanji, this is just broken. 4/6 that has rush and draws 2 trash 1. Crazy. But even in non-Red Sanji format, this is just going to be a great card. Gets you card advantage and swings for 6. Brilliant. Zoro is not going to rest a Dressrosa type stage, but you could rest a Rainbow Luffy leader to get his effect. Not the craziest, but you're still going to play him at 4/6, most likely. Smoker, I think, is one of the best cards in the set. At 5/7 with Banish is great, and gives you an extra Don for your turn, and every subsequent turn. I think this card's brilliant. This is even better in Red Sanji, because it has Rush and Banish, which is just ridiculous. And when he restands 1 Don, he's effectively a 4/7. If you're lucky enough to pull this, absolutely play it. And the same with Kairos. A 7/9 that bounces a 5 is great. Obviously, you can't give this one Rush with Sanji, because he does have an on-play. But it's just a really efficient stat line, and is going to help you with your board control. Blockers are great in pre-release. Unless you're very lucky with your pulls, you're probably going to play every blocker you get. These 3 up here are just jump blockers. Scotch does have an effect, but it's a really bad effect. But just being a 2-cost blocker, the blocker swing is great. Definitely worth including. These over here, these 3/4s, not quite so good. Bellamy can ramp you a Dom when he blocks, but you have to keep 2 up, so it's not great. Bonnie can swap your life with a card from your hand if you want. You might have a trigger to use with her, but probably not. Viola is bad. You're not using this effect. The purple events in this set are not very good. Apu is going to depend on how many supernovas you pull. You get a lot of supernovas. This is a brilliant blocker for 1. However, if you don't, he's going to be very limited, because he's only blocker when you have another supernova. And a side note, there's a blue one called Bian that requires you to have another Tontata, and there are no playable Tontatas, at least good ones. So I didn't even bother putting that here. Frankie is brilliant, however, there's not much to summon, so he's definitely weaker in this than in Constructed. Treble is not useful, but he is a blocker. Marco's the best of these 5k blockers. 5k blockers are in a weird spot, where they're not amazing because their cost is high and you can't free block any swings with them, as opposed to something like a 6k blocker. So you're mostly just sacking these off, but they can attack for 5, so it's fine. Are you going to include most of these? Yeah, probably. Bartolomeo is the only true 6k blocker in the set. His effect is horrible, and he has no counter. The card low-key kind of sucks, but it's a 5/6 blocker. So you're probably going to play it. You can block 5k swings for free and 6k swings for just 1k, which is very relevant. Chopper is, I would say, the best blocker in the set. 2k, 4-6 blocker. Right, we've already gone over him. Next up, events. A lot of events in this set are very bad. However, there are some standouts. If you're playing Rainbow Luffy, Punk Hazard is brilliant. Just gives you Arrested Don for free, because your leader is Caesar Clown. Divine Departure, probably the next best event. It's really flexible. You can either pay 6, get rid of one of your opponent's 8k power units, or you can use it as a rad beam for your leader. Please note, this is a mistranslation. This does not buff characters. This only buffs leaders. Please don't try and use it to save your character and reference my video. This is your warning here. This only buffs leaders. Gum Gum UFO is fine. In the late game, you can use it to debuff something by 4 and give yourself 1000 power. Even just using this as a 2-cost 4k debuff to help control the ward is pretty reasonable. Kamakura Jisoshi is probably the best counter event. Gets you out 2 swings if you use it right. Little Black Bears is expensive, but does draw a card, so you don't lose hand advantage. And Room is a guard point with upside if you have 1 less life. So it's a late game card, but it's pretty good. In terms of the sort of removal events, these are some of the best ones. Damn Punk is just 4 Don KO 5. Like we went over, there's not that many cards that you want to play on 4. So you could play this to just remove your opponent's 3 Don play. It doesn't feel great, but better than doing nothing. And at the end of the game, this can remove basically any blocker. Liberation, if you get behind somehow, this can just remove 2 guys. A great card. You're going to include this. Trigger sucks ass. But this is just like a comeback card. And comeback cards are really hard to come by in pre-release. God Thread is pretty good. You're on 5 and you don't have a 5, or to be honest, this is better if you're on 6. You're on 6, your opponent plays out a 5-cost vanilla. You can remove that, ramp to 7, and then you've got 2 Don to either play maybe a chump blocker, or even just swing 7 with your leader. You've removed your opponent's play and ramp to Don. That seems pretty good to me. And Radio Knife is probably the most efficient removal. 4 Don, rest to 6, KO arrested 5. And this can target 2 different characters to help you have a little bit more flexibility in its usage. Not the craziest card in the world, but maybe worth including, depends on what else you pull. Now, the next section I like to call obviously good cards. These cards are obviously good. You're going to include them. You don't need me to tell you that. I'm not on these last few slides going to put any cards that I've already covered. For example, the Chopper Blocker is obviously good, but we've already gone over them. Sanji is a 3/6 that when it dies draws a card. Enough said. Law is a 7/9, so it's got a vanilla stat line. Doesn't have counter, can heal if you have a supernova. Gotta have a supernova, but I think with this set, it's fairly reasonable for you to have at least a supernova, even if it's not a very good one. And then if you're playing Rainbow Luffy or Yellow Kid, you get a Don for free, which is pretty cool. Basil Hawkins, your opponent is not going to want to kill him. Trashing one of your opponent's life is even better in this format. You're removing a life and a resource. And Prerelease is just a resource game. So removing effectively 2 resources for 1 KO, and this is 1k counter because your opponent's not attacking your leader, is brilliant. This, if you play it on 4, is probably just going to sit on the board for the rest of the game. And it even has a good trigger to boot. What's not to love? 8-cost Kid is great. Gives you cycle, helps you with the consistency, and trashes your opponent's life. Brilliant. 6-cost Luffy is not amazing constructed, however. I think just this having a decent stat line with counter and the ability to snipe cards out of your opponent's hand is going to be very good. Side note, if you're playing this in Red Sanji, it becomes nuts. This is a 6/7 with Rush that snipes a card out of your opponent's hand. Do note you have to have 3 cards in your trash. If you don't, you can't use it. And this isn't like Dressrosa Usopp. You're not always going to have 3. So that's something to note. But this card is very good. And can't be KO'd by an effect. So if your opponent has an event, like, I don't know, Radio Knife, you can just say, No, actually. Actually, that's a bad example because Radio Knife doesn't kill a 6. If they have something that kills a 6, then you can go, no, actually. Inazuma, pretty good. 4-5, and you can rest a blocker when you attack in. Can be something that's not a blocker, of course, but resting a blocker to help you go for game, especially one of these chump blockers, can come up a lot, especially in Red Sanji, because this gains rush. And Smiley, only usable in Rainbow Luffy format. We are not playing any of the Punk Hazard leaders, but decent body, 3k power reduction in that deck. Seems pretty good for me, for helping deal with your opponent's stuff. And it's another 5 cost that you can play out on that 5-don turn. Interesting techs. So over here we've got these 3 Odyssey characters. All of them are okay. None of them amazing. They do all rely on you having one other rested character on board, which can come up more in this than in Constructed, because you have less control over what you're going to draw, but they all have pretty decent effects. Mihawk can restand a 5-cost Odyssey, which includes himself, I suppose, although he's not going to come in rested like he would in Lim. So if you've got one of these other dudes on the board, you can attack with that, play the Mihawk, stand it up, attack again. Bit of extra aggression in Prerelease is always pretty good. Nugate is going to rest a 5 and then KO rest at 3. Not the most impactful, but certainly not bad. And NL just gives you draw 3 trash 2, which that kind of consistency in Prerelease cannot be overlooked. Are you going to include all of these? It's going to depend on what you get, but honestly, probably. Monet, I'm not so sold on. You can't put this behind Kid or pick it up with Caesar like you can in Constructed. But it's okay. It's a 2-don play that diverts an attack and it pays for itself and gives 1k power reduction. It's fine. You're probably going to include this if you get it, just because you're going to be including a bunch of chaff anyway. So this is definitely not the worst, but it's not a crazy card either. Isho in Rainbow Luffy format is great. You can rest 2 5 costs. What's not to love? You can rest your opponent's characters and go for board. You can rest their blockers and go for game. It's a great card. Caribou, again in Rainbow Luffy or in Yellow Kid this time. If you have a Don on him at the start of the game, this just can't be KO'd in battle, which is great. Like I said, removal in pre-release is scant, hard to come by. So battling is the main thing that you're going to be doing in pre-release. And this just being immune to being KO'd in battle at the start of the game is going to be great. One of the best cards you can play on 4 for sure. And then we've got this Blackbeard package. None of these cards are amazing. Obviously in Standard Constructed, Kuzan is wonderful. I think the best of these is probably Shiryu. It's a 4-5-1k that is very hard to remove by battle because it becomes a 4-7 in your opponent's turn. And if you are playing Rainbow Luffy, you can KO an original cost of 3, which is not the most impactful, but maybe you can KO a chump blocker, maybe you can KO one of these 3 costs. It's fine. Jesus Burgess is one of the only other rush options in this format. Are you going to have 8 cards in your trash? Honestly, I'm not sure you really ever are, but it's potentially worth including just in case. Rush is very hard to come by. And if you do get enough of these, you could include Kuzan. At the very least, he just can't be removed by effects, and you can always just trash him to draw a card, which is okay. Even if you don't have anything to summon, he can get a swing, draw your card. It's okay. But this is definitely nowhere near as good as it is in Standard Constructed. So, specific tips for this format. I would say, in general, this set has lower than average blocker and 2k counts, which is going to make Yamato better. Like we went over, not that many blockers, and certainly not that many blockers you're excited to play early. Obviously, these chump blockers are fine, but the rest of these, you're foregoing doing something more powerful. Play out these. So I think that gives Yamato a bit more grounds to be viable. Kid Leader could be worth trying, the Yellow Kid, if you get a lot of Supernova cards. Because of that lack of blockers, making some big blockers, both with the Vanillas, maybe an 8-cost Kid if you pull that. Turning Basil Hawkins into a blocker is still obnoxious. I think could be worth it. And there are a couple of the black cards that are also Supernovas. I believe the Secret Red Black Luffy is. The black Zoro might be as well. I'm not sure on that one. Go First. I think last set, I was a big advocate for going second, because there are a lot of 4-6 vanillas in this set, with a lot of 5-7 vanillas. So I would say going first is going to be potentially more impactful. And there are also quite a few decent counter events. Last set, there weren't that many. In this set, I think Kamakura Jisoshi is a really, really good one. Same with Divine Departure and Room as well. Little Black Bear's more of a tech option. Leaving 3 Don open sucks. But the fact that it draws a card is pretty reasonable. So that's going to be my ultimate guide to OP10 pre-release. For my credentials, I did win the OP09 pre-release. I did get a set of leaders. I'll be honest, there were only 3 players. I went 2-0 and you can only beat what's in front of you, right? In terms of how this pre-release is going to play out, I think it's going to be a little bit more aggressive than OP9. Even if you're not using Red Sanji, just because of that lack of blockers and 2Ks in this set. Hope you all win. If you've got any more tips for people, put them in the comments below. Greatly appreciated. I want to share as much knowledge as we can to ensure that as many of us as possible can win that winner buggy. Either way, thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a great time at your pre-release and a lovely rest of your day.